Mr. President.
Senator from Wisconsin.
Mr. President, I rise today to ask my colleagues to honor the life of Dr. Chris Kirkpatrick by passing a bill to strengthen whistleblower protections. Last year, the Center for Investigative Reporting published an article that revealed allegations of opiate overprescription, whistleblower retaliation, and a culture of fear at the Tomah VA Medical Center in Tomah, Wisconsin. It also detailed the tragic story of Jason Simkuski, a veteran who passed away at the Tomah VA in 2014 from mixed drug toxicity. Jason had over 12 different drugs in his system when he died. Jason's life is honored by a bipartisan bill introduced by my colleague from Wisconsin that I am pleased to co-sponsor, the Jason Simkuski Memorial Opioid Safety Act. The bill aims to improve VA opioid prescribing guidelines and ensures greater coordination and oversight for patient treatments. When I learned of the problems at the Tomah VA, I immediately directed my Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee staff to investigate. They reviewed thousands of pages of documents and conducted 22 interviews. We held 2 hearings in Tomah and 2 in Washington, D.C. to examine what happened at the facility and hear from whistleblowers across the country. And on May 31st of this year, we released a 359-page report detailing the findings of our bipartisan investigation. The unfortunate conclusion of our investigation is that with proper disclosure, the tragedies at the Tomah VA could have been prevented. One of the individuals who blew the whistle on these problems was a psychologist at the Tomah VA named Dr. Chris Kirkpatrick. His portrait stands beside me. Chris came to Tomah in 2008. He treated veterans, the finest among us, for PTSD, substance abuse, and chronic pain. It didn't take long for him to realize that something was not right. Chris told his family and union that he thought doctors were overprescribing, over-medicating patients. The chief of staff at the facility was a doctor that had been known as the Candy Man as far back as 2004 because of the amount of opiates he prescribed for veterans. When the Candy Man found out that Chris was questioning his prescription practices, Chris was warned to stop. But rather than address Chris's concerns, the VA fired him. Tragically, later the day that he was terminated, Chris committed suicide. Chris's managers later said they felt coerced into firing him. Yet no one ever investigated Chris's suicide, and the agency was never held accountable. Inspectors general are supposed to be the government's watchdogs. Instead of promptly investigating, preparing and making a report of its investigation public, the VA Office of Inspector General took almost 3 years to prepare a short, extremely flawed report, administratively closed the investigation, and then buried the report. And then last year, under pressure from news reports and my committee's investigation, the office issued an unsolicited white paper that defended its flawed work and attacked Chris. It even accused him of being a drug dealer. They were retaliating against a dead man. Sean Kirkpatrick, Chris's brother, summed up the office's actions best. He told our committee, and I quote, "The haphazard attempt to discredit and slander Chris was absolutely outrageous to us when our brother was merely questioning opiate abuse and concerns that the veterans were not being cared for properly." Unquote. Sean Kirkpatrick offered invaluable testimony to our committee and asked us to make common sense changes to help ensure that what happened to Chris won't happen to someone else. To address these recommendations and the problems our investigation uncovered, I introduced the Dr. Chris Kirkpatrick Whistleblower Protection Act. Among other things, the bill requires agencies to discipline supervisors that retaliate against whistleblowers and mandates training so employees know their rights and supervisors know how to handle complaints. The bill requires the VA to inform its employees about mental health services available to them and review their protocols to address threats from patients. The bill also prohibits VA employees from accessing the private medical records of coworkers when they blow the whistle as a means to retaliate against them. I ask the full Senate to honor Dr. Chris Kirkpatrick and protect veterans and future whistleblowers by passing these common sense reforms. It would be particularly special for the Senate to pass the bill today, as sadly it is the 7-year anniversary of Chris's passing. This bill received unanimous support of Democrats and Republicans on my committee back in December by a vote of 16-0. It has the support of every Republican in the Senate. Yet, unfortunately, one or more Democrat members are now blocking it. I haven't been told who they are. So I have come to the floor to ask that if a senator objects to this bill, he or she explain why. Protecting whistleblowers and putting our veterans first shouldn't be a partisan issue. I know it sure hasn't been one for me. In fact, just yesterday, the Jason Zimkusky Memorial Opioid Safety Act was approved as part of CARA. I was happy to co-sponsor the bill that the junior senator from my state, a Democrat, introduced. I'm not aware of any Republican member who tried to block its inclusion in CARA, and I was happy to do whatever I could here in the Senate to ensure its passage, because it's just good policy, and it's just good for our veterans. I ask my colleagues to give this bill the same respect by judging it based on policy, not politics, to put our veterans first. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent Mr. President,
Senator from Wisconsin has the floor.
I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 499, S2127. I further ask that the committee reported substitute amendment be withdrawn, the Johnson substitute amendment be agreed to, the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, the title amendment be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President,
Democrat leader.
I reserve the right to object. Mr. President, we as the Republicans want to work to improve veterans' benefits. It's so very, very important. They give a lot, and we don't take good enough care of them. I understand Senator Johnson's legislation. I appreciate that. But there are a number of bipartisan bills to help our veterans. The Democrats want to pass as well. We have our bill. Our bills, he has his bill. So I hope we can work together in the next little bit to come up with a package of bills that would give Republicans a few of the things they want and give us some of the things we want. Because the issue before us, as valid as it could be and might be, it addresses a very narrow issue that the senator from Wisconsin seeks to address. But a variety of matters are left undone. So I hope we'll be in a position to pass the legislation by the senator from Wisconsin, but we aren't there yet, so I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, could I ask?
Senator from Wisconsin.
Might I ask the minority leader, are you objecting for yourself or on behalf of others? And further, is there a reason for the objection?
It is not in order to ask questions of someone who does not have the floor. The senator from Wisconsin.
Mr. President, it's extremely disappointing that the minority leaders objected to a common sense piece of legislation that was passed, again, let me repeat, unanimously out of my committee. Not one Democrat member of our committee objected to this. It was a good piece of legislation. It's so important. I am shocked, coming from the private sector, how much retaliation actually occurs within government even though we've passed numerous bills protecting whistleblowers. The fact of the matter is had these tragedies been known, had the whistleblowers been protected, had the Office of Inspector General made its investigation reports public, tragedies would have been prevented. One of the veterans that died at Tacoma VA, his name was Thomas Bayer. I was talking to his daughter a week or so after he passed from neglect as he suffered a couple strokes waiting to be cared for. And she said, "Senator, had I only known of the problems of Tacoma VA, I never would have taken my father there. He'd be alive today." All I'm asking for is a common sense bill that was, again, passed unanimously by my committee. And unfortunately, it's being objected to and it will not pass today. You know, at a moment in time in our history when there are so many divisions in this country, this is one thing that we all agree on this body. To honor the promises to the finest among us, our veterans. This bill honors those promises. This bill would protect the whistleblowers that have the courage to come forward and report problems at the VA healthcare centers. This bill would help protect veterans in the future. Now, one of the things I'm most proud of as chairman of the committee is I've worked in a very bipartisan fashion. I've forged agreements. I've looked for areas of agreement that unify us. By using that approach, a business person's approach, we've reported out 83 pieces of legislation. This is one of them out of my committee. 26 of those pieces of legislation have been signed into law. By, again, finding areas of agreement that unify us as a committee, as a Senate, as a Congress, as a nation. This should have been one of those bills. I sincerely hope that we can overcome whatever objection, which was not stated here on the floor, this very important piece of whistleblower protection as soon as possible. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.